by Ava Walker. I never thought I'd return. Not after everything that happened. Not after I was erased, not just from the world, but from the memory of those who once called me family. But here I was, back in my hometown, after 12 years of absence that no one ever truly questioned. Or maybe they did, but only in whispers, behind closed doors, where shame speaks louder than truth. 12 years. 12 years of orders signed in invisible ink. 12 years of silence that could never be broken without consequence. I disappeared under classified files and desert winds. I lived under names that weren't mine, with scars no one could see, because I was trained to hide them. I was told I was protecting them by staying away, and for a while I believed it. But believing it didn't stop the ache. My name is Ava Walker, and if you were to ask anyone in this town about me, they'd probably say something like, "Oh, Ava? Yeah, she left, joined the army, never came back. I think she just gave up on everyone." Some might be a little crueler. She was a coward, left when things got hard. Her mom was sick, her little sister needed her. She chose herself. The truth? I didn't choose myself. I didn't even choose the uniform. It chose me. And once I put it on, there was no turning back. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was the letter I held in my hand, folded, creased, the edges smudged by the sweat of my palm. It was an invitation, or maybe a challenge. Lieutenant Cadet Lillian Walker's graduation dinner. You are cordially invited to attend. Saturday, 1900 hours. Military Hall, Base 17B, reserved for family guests only. The irony made me laugh out loud the first time I read it. Family guests only. I hadn't been called family in over a decade. The invitation wasn't from my sister. I knew that instantly. The handwriting was too formal, too bureaucratic. But someone knew I was still alive. Someone who believed I deserved to be there. And for reasons I couldn't explain, maybe guilt, maybe longing, I went. I arrived 15 minutes early. Old habits die hard. The base looked newer, shinier than the one I remembered. Freshly painted gates, clean-cut hedges. Security was tight but efficient. I wore civilian clothes, simple, elegant. Navy blue blouse, black trousers, hair tied in a low bun. I blended in, just enough to be overlooked but not suspicious. I gave my name at the checkpoint. The young soldier looked up, hesitated, and then waved me through. He knew, or someone told him. The banquet hall was already half full. Rows of round tables with white linen cloths and polished silverware. Waiters moved between guests like ghosts. Flags lined the back wall, and a small stage had been set with a podium and a microphone. I scanned the room. I saw her. Lily. She stood near the front, laughing with a group of fellow cadets, her dark hair in a neat twist, her posture perfect. She looked strong, confident, so different from the girl I left behind. For a moment, I felt pride. And then shame followed. Because I didn't belong here. Not really. Not after everything. I found an empty table near the corner of the room, far from the main stage. Sat down, folded my hands, kept my head low. Tried not to look like someone watching their past from behind a glass wall. The voices around me blurred. Names, ranks, families, they floated by like radio chatter in a storm. I was half listening, half drifting, until I heard it. "Oh, you see that woman at the corner?" "Which one?" "The one in blue, alone, looks out of place." "Yeah, weird. Maybe a distant aunt." "Nah, I heard Lily had a sister once, disappeared. Some say she bailed on the family. Could be her." I froze. They didn't know I could hear them. I didn't turn, didn't breathe, just let the words settle like ash on my skin. bailed. Is that what they thought? Another voice chimed in. I thought she was dishonorably discharged, or went rogue. You never know with those types. My chest tightened, but I said nothing. I wasn't here to defend myself. I came to see Lily graduate. That was all. Then I saw him. My father. He entered from the side door, flanked by 2 older officers. His gray suit fit too tightly over his thick frame, and he walked with the slow pride of someone who believed the world still owed him applause. He looked exactly the same, except for the eyes. They didn't search the room, didn't notice me, or maybe they did, and chose not to stop. I remember once, when I was 13, standing in our driveway with a scraped knee, watching him leave for a town council meeting. I said, "Dad, I need help." He looked at me, expression blank, and replied, "Then get up." That was his way, always was. Lily took the stage an hour later. The room fell quiet. She stood at the podium in full dress uniform. Her voice was clear, rehearsed. She spoke of duty, of honor, of sacrifice. She thanked her mentors, her fellow cadets, our father, our late mother. And then, her voice shifted. Lastly, I want to acknowledge someone who isn't here tonight. I tensed. My sister, Ava, the one who disappeared. A ripple of whispers spread across the room. People have said a lot about her. Some called her a coward. Others said she chose war over family. I don't know what to believe anymore. She paused, looked down. But I remember being 8 years old and watching her teach me how to braid my hair. I remember her holding me when Mom cried herself to sleep. I remember her telling me I could be anything I wanted. My eyes burned. Wherever you are, Ava, I hope you're at peace. The applause was quiet, respectful. But I couldn't move. Because I wasn't at peace. Not even close. That was when he stood up. Not Lily, not my father. Captain Rourke. Tall, sharp eyes. The kind of man who saw through uniforms and straight into your spine. He looked toward the back of the room, toward me. Our eyes locked. He nodded, once, firmly. And then he turned to the microphone and said, "Before we close tonight's ceremony, there is one more person in this room who deserves to be recognized." My heart pounded. He continued, "She is not on the guest list, not in the program, not even supposed to be here." Everyone turned. Chairs creaked, silverware clanked. A few gasps, a few whispers. I stood slowly, hands at my sides, face expressionless. Captain Rourke raised his voice just enough. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back Major General Ava Walker." For a moment, no one moved. Not a breath, not a whisper. The room, which minutes earlier had echoed with laughter, polished toasts, and the clinking of silverware, turned into a still frame, like a photograph caught just before the shutter clicked. They didn't know what to do with the name Captain Rourke had just spoken. Some of them looked around in confusion, half expecting someone else to rise. A woman in uniform, maybe, with the crisp lines and iron spine they imagined a major general should carry. Not me, dressed in civilian clothes, hair tied back in a knot out of habit, posture weary not from shame but from battle. Yet I stood. Not tall, not proud, just steady. The eyes that scanned me now carried layers, recognition in some, disbelief in most, and in a few, discomfort. As if my presence rewrote a version of the past they had grown too comfortable believing. I took the first step forward, then another. The sound of my heels against the tiled floor felt louder than any gunshot I'd heard overseas. Each click echoed like a verdict. I walked past the round tables where strangers stared, past faces that once might have belonged to neighbors, friends, or fellow soldiers. And then I walked past my father. He didn't look at me, not once. His hands rested on the edge of the table, knuckles white. His jaw was set, teeth grinding behind a forced smile, as if refusing to crack under the weight of reality. His only daughter, the one he'd cursed under his breath for years, was now walking past him with the rank of a general, and he couldn't stop it. I reached the stage. Captain Rourke stepped aside. He didn't salute. He bowed his head, slightly, respectfully, as a soldier does when words no longer serve. I turned to face the room. Hundreds of eyes. One microphone. One name, mine, that still rang like a bullet in their ears. I hadn't prepared a speech. I never intended to speak at all. So I told the truth. I was told this was a private event, family only. Some people chuckled nervously. Others stared blankly. I let the pause stretch just long enough to settle the discomfort. I wasn't invited, I said, softer this time. Not officially, not by the person I came to see. I turned my gaze toward Lily. She sat still in her chair, frozen mid-expression. Her fork lay abandoned on her plate. Her mouth was slightly open, as if caught between a gasp and a memory. And in that moment, she looked so much like the girl I left behind. I spent 12 years following orders I couldn't explain, wearing a uniform I couldn't talk about, watching brothers and sisters fall in places that don't exist on any map. But nothing prepared me for the silence I'd face back home. A ripple of movement, people shifting uncomfortably. The truth has sharp edges. I understand why some of you look at me the way you do. You heard things, saw nothing, made your own judgments. I would have done the same. Someone near the front coughed. Another stirred their glass, as if trying to disappear behind the ice. But I came back because this night wasn't about me. It was about a girl who once braided her doll's hair the same way I braided hers. It was about a sister who followed my footsteps even after the world told her I'd failed. And it was about remembering that not all ghosts want revenge. Some just want to be seen. I stepped back. No applause followed, not right away. Just silence, deep, aching, like the silence of a war zone after the last shot has been fired. Then someone stood. Not my father, not Lily. A young cadet, probably 20, clean-shaven, still green around the eyes. He raised his hand in a salute. Then another cadet followed, and another. Within seconds, the room was filled with soldiers rising to their feet, saluting not a legend, not a myth, but a woman who had returned. Not for glory, but for truth. The dinner resumed eventually. Conversations picked up again, albeit in a more restrained tone. Some people still cast looks in my direction, curious, cautious, calculating. Others avoided eye contact altogether. I didn't mind. I wasn't here to be forgiven. I was here to forgive myself. Lily hadn't moved from her seat. She stared at her plate, untouched, as her friends whispered in clusters around her. I stood alone near the edge of the hall, sipping water, letting the hum of voices drift by like smoke. That's when I heard her voice behind me. Ava. I turned slowly. She stood there, eyes red but dry, her jaw tight. She was trembling, not out of fear, but restraint. I opened my mouth, but she cut me off. You left. I nodded. I did. You didn't write, didn't call, not even when Mom. She stopped, bit her lip, looked away. I wanted to, I whispered. You have no idea how many. Then why didn't you? I hesitated. The truth was complicated, messy, full of clearance levels and consequences. But she didn't need a military debrief. She needed a sister. Because they told me I couldn't. Because I was afraid that even if I did, you wouldn't want to hear from me. Her shoulders fell. I hated you, she said quietly. For so long. I blamed you for everything. Mom's sickness, Dad's anger, the silence.
I built this whole version of you in my head, and none of it made sense when I saw you tonight. I stepped closer. You don't have to forgive me. She looked up. Her eyes met mine. Same shape, same color, just sadder. I don't, she said. Not yet. I know. Okay. But, she hesitated, will you come tomorrow? There's a family brunch. I know Dad won't speak to you, but I want you there. My throat tightened. I'll be there. She didn't hug me. We weren't there yet. But as she turned to walk away, she glanced back and said, almost like a challenge, "You still braid the same way?" I smiled. Only for sisters. Later that night, I sat alone in my hotel room, uniform folded in my bag. I hadn't worn it tonight, not out of shame, but because I wanted to be seen for more than just my medals. On the nightstand lay a photo. One I kept through every deployment, every base, every lonely cot. It was of us. Lily, age 6, in a fairy costume. Me, 17, with camo paint smudged on my cheeks. Her hands tangled in my hair as I pretended to be annoyed. I remember what she whispered that day. "Promise you'll never leave." I did leave, but I came back. And that has to mean something.
I woke up to the sound of rain tapping against the hotel window, like fingers drumming a message I couldn't quite understand. The sky was soft gray, not the kind that begged for sadness, but the kind that quietly warned you the past might be walking right behind you, in silence, barefoot, waiting for your attention. It was Sunday, and I had agreed to attend a family brunch. I stared at the ceiling for a while before getting up. My boots were by the door, still polished from habit. My uniform hung untouched in the closet, but I didn't reach for it. Today wasn't about the army. Today was about ghosts. I wore something simple, a white shirt tucked into faded jeans, a navy cardigan I used to wear in Kabul on cold nights. I pulled my hair back, but not too tightly. Lily always said I looked softer that way. I slipped the silver chain from the drawer, the one with Mom's ring on it, the ring I'd taken just before my last deployment, the ring I never had the courage to return. I held it for a moment, then put it on. Not as a gesture, but as armor. The Walker family house hadn't changed. Same green mailbox, same rusted gate, same front porch with chipped white paint where I used to sit after running 3 miles in the summer heat. As I approached, the wind carried a familiar smell: coffee, toast, a hint of burnt bacon. Someone was trying too hard in the kitchen. I knocked once. The door was already unlocked. When I stepped in, the house didn't greet me. It studied me. The walls were the same, but the photos had shifted. Some were missing, some replaced. The picture of me in uniform that once sat on the hallway shelf was gone, but a new one had taken its place. Lily, in her cadet dress blues, shaking hands with a general. I stood there for a moment, hands in my pockets, feeling like I was trespassing in a life that had moved on without me. Then I heard her. "Hey." Lily stood in the kitchen doorway, apron on, a spatula in one hand, hair pulled into a loose ponytail. She looked relaxed, still tired, but lighter somehow. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "You invited me. Yesterday, after 12 years, that doesn't count as reliable." I smirked. Fair enough. She stepped aside. "Come on, food's almost ready." I walked into the kitchen, and for the first time in years, I smelled home. Not sand, not oil, not steel, just toast and tension. He was already seated at the table, our father. Newspaper in front of him, glasses low on his nose, coffee cup half full. He didn't look up when I walked in, didn't greet me, didn't scowl, just turned the page of the paper like the act of doing so could erase my presence from his vision. I sat across from him without asking. "Morning," I said. He turned another page. "Still silent treatment after all these years?" I asked, half smiling. "You're really going for a record, huh?"
Lily gave me a warning glance from the stove, but I ignored it. "I'm not here to fight," I added. Still, nothing. He took a sip of coffee, folded the paper, and finally spoke. "I told them you were dead." It hit harder than I expected. "You what?" "I told everyone you died overseas. Made it easier for your mother, for Lily, for me." I blanked slowly. That was convenient. No, that was necessary. He stood and walked to the sink. "You think coming back now makes up for everything? You think being a general erases the fact that your mother died thinking you hated her?" I froze. "I wrote to her," I said, barely above a whisper. "She never got anything. They were intercepted, all of them. I wasn't allowed to contact." He turned. "You weren't allowed, or you just didn't care enough to try harder." The room went quiet. Lily placed the pan on the stove and stepped between us. "Enough, both of you." She looked at Dad. "You can either eat in silence or leave the table." Then, to me, "And you, stop treating this like a briefing room. This isn't a mission. It's a mess, so sit with it." She grabbed a plate, served herself, and sat. Dad grunted, returned to his chair. I stayed still. Eventually, I sat too. And we ate. 3 people, 3 timelines, 1 table. We didn't speak for a long time. The clinking of forks against plates filled the room like static. I watched my father's hands, bigger than mine, knuckles marked from years of carpentry. He used to build toy planes for us. I broke mine once and cried. He fixed it without a word. He wasn't always like this. The war changed him, then life did the rest. "I got a letter once," he said suddenly, "years ago. No return address, just 1 sentence." I looked up. "What did it say?" He hesitated. Tell Lily to keep dreaming." I swallowed. That was me. He nodded slowly. I figured. We didn't say anything else, but something shifted. Not healed, not yet, but acknowledged. And that, in our family, was the closest thing to progress. After brunch, Lily walked me to the porch. "You okay?" she asked. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "It's strange. Being here, it's like walking into a room where your name used to mean something, and now it's just wallpaper." She sat beside me. "You know, when I was 13, I told everyone at school my sister was a spy." I laughed. "You weren't far off." "They didn't believe me, said you probably ran off with some guy." I turned to her. "I'm sorry I wasn't here for you, for any of it." She shook her head. "You're here now." "Too late?" I asked. She leaned back. "That depends. Are you staying?" I didn't know how to answer that, not yet. But I reached into my bag and pulled out something. A photo, old, folded at the corners. Lily, age 5, standing next to a snowman. I was behind her, holding a scarf around her. Mom stood to the side, smiling with tired eyes. Lily took it carefully. "I forgot this existed," she whispered. "I carried it everywhere," I said. "I needed to remember what I was fighting for." She stared at the image for a long time, then slipped it into her coat pocket. "You still braid hair," I chuckled. "You keep asking that like it's some kind of mystical skill." "It is," she said, "especially when it came from you." We didn't hug goodbye, but when I reached my car and looked back, she was still there, waiting, watching, like someone who finally believed the dead could come back, not as ghosts, but as sisters.
Americano. 3 days passed. I didn't plan to stay that long. In fact, I had told myself I'd be gone the morning after brunch, back to the hotel, pack the bag, one last drive through town, and vanish again like I always did. But something kept me here. It wasn't just Lily. It wasn't even the strange conversation with my father that somehow hurt less than I imagined. It was something quieter, like unfinished business humming in the corners of every street I walked. I visited Mom's grave, alone. It took me 45 minutes to find it, not because I forgot where it was, I remembered every step. I was just afraid I wouldn't be able to stand still once I got there. Her name was carved in a pale granite headstone, surrounded by dried flowers and one photograph laminated against the weather. The three of us, before everything fell apart. I stood there in silence, hands tucked into the sleeves of my jacket, and whispered the apology I never got to say. I thought that would bring closure, but closure, I've learned, is not a door you close. It's a door you keep slightly open, just enough to remind yourself that healing isn't forgetting. I left a single white magnolia on her grave. Then I drove around town until the sun set, stopping in front of the high school, the corner store, the diner where I had my first fight, and the bridge where I used to run until I collapsed. The place hadn't changed much, but I had. That night, I got a message. Not from Lily. It was from Captain Rourke. If you're still in town, we're holding a closed recognition ceremony on base tomorrow at 1300. No press, just soldiers. You might want to attend. Dress uniform optional, but I recommend it. I stared at the text for a long time, phone trembling slightly in my hand. I hadn't worn the uniform in 3 years, not since the final debriefing. Not since they handed me the medal I never wanted and told me I could fade away peacefully now. But Rourke wasn't just any officer. He was there when I pulled his unit from the North Cliffs of Darkhell during the Black Signal lockdown. He watched me drag a bleeding private up a hillside with a dislocated shoulder and no backup. He carried the other end of the stretcher when my commanding officer was taken down. And he never forgot. I stood in front of the mirror for 20 minutes the next morning, staring at the uniform hanging behind me like a ghost with impeccable tailoring. The medals glinted in the light. I remembered how each one felt in my hand. Heavy, silent, confusing. I hadn't earned these for glory. I earned them for surviving what others didn't. But I wore them anyway. The jacket still fit. My name was still stitched over the left breast. Walker. Simple, sharp, clean. The boots took a moment to break back in. My hands shook as I tied the laces. When I stepped outside, people looked twice. It wasn't the uniform. It was the woman inside it. Base 17B was buzzing with quiet tension. Not formal, not celebratory, more like the air before a storm. Charged, careful, thick with memory. Rourke met me at the gate. No salute, just a nod. You came. I owe you. No, you don't. He led me across the courtyard toward a small building just off the main hangar, a place I remember once being used for classified briefings and damage assessments. Inside, a crowd of about 30 people. Uniforms, a few civilians. No cameras, no podium, just rows of chairs in a semicircle around a single table with a metal case. I scanned the room, recognized a few faces, soldiers I thought I'd never see again. A lieutenant from my 4th rotation in the East Sector, a medic who once stitched my shoulder without anesthesia, a scout who lost his hearing in a blast but read lips better than anyone alive. And at the back, Lily, wearing a cadet's version of my uniform. She didn't smile, she didn't wave, but she was there. And somehow, that was enough. Rourke stepped forward. Most of you know why we're here. For those who don't, you'll understand by the time we're done. He opened the case. Inside, a medal. Not a standard issue. It was rare, almost never awarded publicly. The Shadow Star. I had only seen it twice in my career. Both times, it was handed posthumously. My stomach turned. Rourke didn't read a speech, didn't list my achievements. He simply said, "She was there when no one else was. She led teams into places the government won't admit exist. She came back with fewer people each time, but never left anyone behind. She took orders that no one else had the courage to accept, and she disobeyed one once. To save us. He turned to me. Ava Walker, you don't have to accept this, but we have to offer it. I stepped forward, looked down at the medal, and shook my head. I didn't come here for medals. I came back for my sister, for my name, for the truth. Rourke nodded. Then let the record show truth sometimes wears a face, not a ribbon. He closed the case. And just like that, the room stood, not to applaud, not to cheer, but to respect. After the ceremony, Lily approached. She stared at the case in Rourke's hands, then back at me. You turned it down? I didn't come to be remembered. I came to remember who I was. She paused. I don't understand you. I smiled gently. You're not supposed to. Not yet. But I want to, she added softer. I looked around the base, the gravel, the smell of oil and gunmetal, the banners flapping in the wind, and felt something shift. I'm not sure where I belong anymore, I said. Lily hesitated, then offered with cautious hope, maybe start here. Later that night, I walked past the old elementary school, past the street where Mom used to walk me home after classes, past the field where I learned how to throw a punch because a boy made fun of my shoes. I found myself standing in front of the house again. This time, I didn't knock. I opened the door, stepped inside, and heard Dad in the living room, watching an old war documentary, volume low. He didn't turn around when I walked in, but he said over his shoulder, "Your mother would have been proud." I swallowed hard, then answered, "I know."
The invitation came folded in half, slipped under the front door like a note from the past, plain white cardstock, no military seal, no stamp of formality, just 5 words, handwritten in tight cursive. Sunday dinner, 6 p.m., home. I didn't need to guess who sent it. Lily's handwriting hadn't changed much since high school. She still curled her L's like treble clefs and dotted her I's with tiny, careful dots. I stared at the note for a long time, sitting on the couch in my old childhood home, a couch that wasn't mine anymore, in a house where I'd become a guest. Part of me thought it was a trap. Not the dangerous kind, not with guns or accusations, but the kind where your heart steps into something fragile, only to realize you're still wearing combat boots. I dressed with more hesitation than I'd ever admit. Not the uniform this time, just jeans, a sweater, and the leather jacket I wore the day I left town at 25. The one Lily used to call my storm coat because I never wore it in sunshine. When I stepped outside, the air was cool. Leaves had started falling early, coating the sidewalk in gold and rust. The walk to the house took 12 minutes. I counted them. Each step felt like crossing a minefield of memory. I passed the lamppost where Lily fell and broke her tooth when we were kids. The tree Dad carved our initials into with a pocket knife the year before Mom got sick. The mailbox that used to lean crooked until I fixed it at 15 with a wrench and some bad advice. All still there, all quietly waiting. The door opened before I could knock. Lily stood there, apron on, hands dusted in flour. "You came," she said. "You invited me." We used the same lines too often, a dance of old defenses. She stepped aside and let me in. The house smelled like roasted chicken, rosemary, and bread. Comfort, danger, home. In the dining room, the table was already set. White plates, folded cloth napkins, the old cracked salt shaker Mom refused to replace. And at the far end, sitting with his back to the window, was my father. No newspaper this time, no shield, just him, waiting. We ate in near silence for the first few minutes. Forks scraped gently, glasses clanked, chairs creaked. Then, like a switch, Lily spoke. "So, how long are you staying?" I looked up. Her tone was casual, but her eyes were sharp. "I'm not sure," I answered, honestly. "Not going back?" she asked.
To where? She paused. I don't know, wherever they send people like you. I smiled faintly. They don't send us anywhere anymore. We fade out, quietly, no ceremony. Dad cleared his throat, first sound he made all night. And that's it? After everything, they just let you walk? I turned to him. Would you prefer they dragged me? He didn't answer. I left parts of myself all over the world, I said, softly. In places I can't talk about, with people who never came home. I didn't want a parade. I wanted peace. Lily leaned forward. And did you find it? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I said, when you called me a ghost at the dinner, that hurt, but it wasn't wrong. She looked down. I didn't mean to. You did, but it's okay. I was a ghost. I made myself one. Dad put down his fork. You could have called. Once. Just once. I turned to him, eyes burning now. You think I didn't try? You think I didn't sit in tents in the middle of nowhere with sand in my lungs and blood on my boots, praying someone would let me write to my sister, to Mom? They erased me, Dad, for national security, for protocol. I became a code, a number. And when I finally came home, I didn't even know how to say hi. He looked at me, really looked. I hated you, he said. I know. For leaving, I know. For making me bury your mother without you, I know. His hands trembled slightly. She waited for you, he whispered, every day. I blinked fast, forcing the tears back down like I'd been trained to. I waited too, I said. He nodded. And now? Now, I'm just trying to figure out if I still belong here. After dinner, Lily insisted on washing the dishes. You cooked, I said. Let me help. She smiled. If you want to help, dry. We stood side by side at the sink, like we used to. She washed, I dried. Quiet rhythm, familiar, peaceful, dangerous. You think he'll ever forgive me? I asked. She glanced over her shoulder. I don't think it's about forgiveness. I think it's about grief and how everyone carries it different. I nodded. I carried mine in silence. He carried his in anger. And you? She shrugged. In ambition and denial. Fair. As I stepped toward the door to leave, Dad stood in the hallway, blocking it. Not intentionally, just standing. I fixed the fence, he said. I blanked. What? The back one, the one you broke trying to sneak out when you were 16. I smiled. Still blaming me for that? You snapped the post in half. You told me it was a raccoon. It was easier than admitting you were stronger than you looked. We stood there, unsure what came next. Then he said, voice low, your mother would have been proud of both of you. I swallowed. Thank you. He nodded once, then stepped aside. And for the first time in years, I walked through the front door without feeling like I was abandoning something. I didn't go back to the hotel. Instead, I drove out past the edge of town, past the gas station that closed at 9, past the fields we used to run through. I parked near the water tower and climbed the hill behind it, the one Lily and I used to call Signal Peak, because from there we could see the entire town. I sat in the grass, watched the lights flicker across rooftops. Breathe. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was hiding.
The town moved slowly, like always. It never rushed, never demanded, just watched you quietly, like an old dog that never forgot your scent. By the end of the week, I could feel the rhythm of it again, the way the church bells echoed 2 minutes after the hour, the way Mrs. Cranston still walked her 3-legged poodle down Maple Street, and the way teenagers lingered outside the same old corner store pretending not to care about anything. I blended in, more than I expected. People stopped staring. Some nodded, some whispered. And one afternoon, as I left the library with an old hardcover tucked under my arm, a girl around 10 years old ran up beside me and said, "Are you the soldier lady from the dinner?" I stopped, unsure how to answer. "Maybe," I said. "Depends who's asking." She grinned. "You're cool. My brother said you saved people in the mountains." I smiled. "Your brother sounds smart." She beamed and skipped off down the sidewalk, ponytail bouncing.
I stood there a long time, holding a library book and a truth I hadn't let myself admit until that moment. Coming back wasn't the end of something, it was the start. I started visiting the base during off hours, not in uniform, not for show, just to walk, just to remember. Sometimes I passed groups of young cadets running drills, shouting cadence, full of that nervous, excited energy I remembered so well. They'd glance at me, some saluted, I never corrected them. Other times I sat in the mess hall with Rourke, drinking bad coffee and swapping stories that never made it into official reports. He was a good listener, always had been. That was what made him a rare kind of officer. He knew that sometimes silence was more powerful than strategy. One afternoon, as we sat watching a group of recruits run tactical patterns on the range, he asked, "You ever going back?" I looked at the sun breaking through the clouds over the gunmetal roofs. "I don't think I can." "Or don't want to?" "Both," I said. He didn't push, but he slid an envelope across the table. "Offer, no pressure." I didn't open it, not yet. I just nodded and slipped it into my jacket. He knew I might never read it, and he was okay with that. That night, back at the house, Lily was sitting on the porch when I pulled up. She had 2 mugs of tea waiting, one in each hand. "Did you know they still talk about you on base?" she asked. "They talk about everyone. Gossip is a military tradition." "They say you walked through a minefield blindfolded once." "That one's not true. I walked through it, but not blindfolded. I'm not stupid." She smirked. We sat in silence a while, sipping tea, watching the sky turn darker and the porch light flicker on automatically. Then she said, out of nowhere, "Do you remember Josh Camden?" I nearly choked on my tea. "Seriously? He came by the clinic last week. Is he still as arrogant as ever?" "More, but he asked about you." I raised an eyebrow. "Did he now?" "Said something like, 'Tell Ava I still owe her $10 and an apology.'" I laughed. "He does." She nudged me with her elbow. "I think you scared him for life." "I was 16. He was 20 and wouldn't leave you alone. You threw a wrench at his car." "Gently." She shook her head. "That's not how I remember it." We both laughed, harder than we had in years, and it didn't feel forced, didn't feel like patching holes in a sinking boat. It felt like building something new. The next morning, I found a letter in the mailbox. No envelope, just folded once. Typed. Short. Precise. To Major General Ava Walker, retired. "You are formally invited to speak at the Cadet Honor Dinner this Friday. Subject: sacrifice, silence, and strength. Duration: 10 minutes. Your presence is optional, but your story is not. Dash, Command HQ." I reread it 3 times. The words weren't flattering, weren't poetic, but the last line hit like a steel plate. Your presence is optional, but your story is not. I sat on the porch for hours after that, letter in one hand, coffee in the other, watching squirrels raid the bird feeder like little commandos. The irony wasn't lost on me. That Friday, I stood in front of the mirror in full uniform, again. For the first time since the Shadow Star ceremony, I wore every medal, every ribbon, every stitch I earned. Not for glory, not for them, for her. For the girl I used to be, the one who left with a backpack and a dream of becoming more than her last name. Lily drove me to the base, didn't speak much, just squeezed my shoulder before I stepped out. "You've got this," she said. I know, and I did. The honor dinner was smaller than the graduation one, tighter, more intimate. Chairs in rows, candles on tables, a low hum of expectation. I stood behind the curtain, breathing in the stillness before stepping into light. Then my name was called. Major General Ava Walker. I walked out to polite applause. A few stood, most didn't. Didn't matter. I stepped up to the mic, looked over the room, saw faces that reminded me of every age I'd ever been. Scared, brave, hopeful, broken. I began. "I'm not here to give a speech about war." I let that settle. "I'm here to talk about something that doesn't get medals, doesn't get parades, but weighs more than both." I paused. Silence. I told them about the missions I couldn't name, about the friends I couldn't save, about the dreams that stopped when the boots came off. I told them about Mom, about Lily, about coming home and not knowing how to walk into a room without flinching, about how you can carry a gun for a decade and still feel unarmed when facing your father's eyes, about how strength isn't in what you survive, it's in how you come back from it. I ended with this. You'll be told to be silent, to hold it in, to be tough, and sometimes you must. But never forget, silence is not the absence of pain. It's the choice to feel it later. Don't wait too long. I stepped back. Applause came slower this time. Not polite, not loud, just real. Lily stood. Then Rourke. Then the room. And I didn't cry. Not there. But later, in the car, I did. Not because it hurt, but because it finally didn't.
I packed my bags at midnight. No ceremony, no second thoughts. Just the quiet decision of someone who had once again stayed too long in a place where the walls knew her too well. The honor dinner had gone better than I ever imagined. I had said what needed to be said. Lily was proud. Even Dad, in his own wordless way, seemed to make peace with me just by letting the front door stay open. But there was something inside me that still didn't sit right. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was that I had finally let myself feel something again, and that terrified me more than anything. I folded my uniform last, careful, methodical, the way we were taught in the field. I smoothed the ribbons, took one long breath before zipping the bag closed. I'd leave a note, I thought, something short. Thank you, I'll write soon. And I'd be gone before sunrise. I made it as far as the front porch, my duffel over one shoulder, boots laced, engine keys in hand. The world was quiet, that particular kind of quiet that only happens in small towns after midnight, when everything has gone to sleep except for the shadows and the regrets. I was halfway down the steps when I heard the door creak behind me. Really? Lily's voice cut through the dark. I turned slowly. She stood in pajama pants and an old hoodie, hair a mess, but eyes burning. I thought you were staying, she said. I never said that. You didn't have to. I looked down. I don't belong here, Lil. She stepped closer. That's not your choice to make anymore. You don't understand. No, she snapped. You don't. You come back, you shake a few hands, give a speech that makes half the base cry. You get Dad to finally look you in the eye, and then what? You vanish again, just like before? I'm not the same person I was. Exactly, and that's why you should stay. I didn't answer. Because what could I say? She stared at me, fierce, fragile. I was 10 when you left. I didn't even know how to tie my hair right. And then you were gone. I waited, every birthday, every holiday. I even set your place at the table the first 2 years, just in case. And then Mom got worse, I still believed you'd show up. Like some movie. Like you'd burst through the door with medals and a suitcase and tell us you were home. But you didn't. I buried Mom without you. I held Dad's hand while he broke. And I learned how to stop hoping for ghosts. My throat tightened. Then I stopped hoping for you. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. And now you're here. And you're finally real. And it hurts. Because I was okay being angry. I made peace with your absence. But this halfway version of you, it's worse. So if you're going to leave, Ava, just go. Don't linger. Don't send letters. Don't wave from the car. But if you're going to stay, stay. I couldn't speak. She turned and walked back inside, leaving the door half open behind her. I stood there for a long time. The kind of long where stars move and streetlights blink like Morse code. I set the duffel down on the steps, sat beside it, and waited. For what? I didn't know. Maybe for the version of myself that always ran, to come back and tell me it was okay to stop. I slept on the porch.
When I woke, the sun was just breaking over the rooftops. A breeze carried the smell of wet earth and maple. The front door creaked again. This time, it was Dad. He stood in his old slippers, holding 2 mugs of coffee. Without a word, he handed me one and sat beside me on the step. We didn't speak. Not for a long time. But the silence wasn't the kind that builds walls. It was the kind that breaks them gently. He sipped, stared at the yard like it held answers. Then he said, "She gets that fire from you." I smiled. "She's got her own match." He nodded. "You know," he continued, "when your mother was sick, she asked about you every morning. Even when she couldn't remember her own name anymore, she'd still say, 'Did Ava call?'" I blinked fast, looked away. "I'd lie sometimes," he admitted. "Tell her you said you loved her." "I did," I whispered. He took another sip. "I know." We sat until the coffee went cold, and for the first time, he reached out and placed his hand over mine. Rough, weathered, real. Later that afternoon, I unpacked. Not all of it, but enough. I put my boots by the door, hung my jacket in the closet, left my duffel open in the corner. Not to run, just as a reminder that I could leave, but didn't. Lily found me in the kitchen an hour later. "Apology accepted," she said, teasing. I didn't say sorry. She raised an eyebrow. "Yet." I grinned. "I'm doing the dishes, that counts." She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "So, what now?" "I don't know." I wiped a plate dry. "But I think I'd like to figure it out here." She nodded. "Good," and walked off, humming something under her breath. It sounded like a song from our childhood, one I'd forgotten until that moment. That night, I walked down to the river alone. The stars reflected off the surface like scattered metals. I sat on a fallen log, listening to frogs, wind, and the distant hum of the highway. And for the first time in over a decade, I felt something I didn't recognize right away. Stillness. Not the kind you earn through silence or war. The kind you build. One word, one dish, one apology at a time.
It's been 3 months. 3 months since I stood at the edge of the front porch with a packed duffel and 1 foot out the door. 3 months since Lily said, "If you're going to stay, stay." 3 months since I sat beside my father and drank cold coffee under the early morning light. And I stayed. Not because everything was fixed, not because some final forgiveness came crashing down in a golden beam from heaven, but because I realized something. Belonging isn't about being invited back. It's about choosing to stay when you no longer have to. Lily and I fell into a rhythm, not sisters pretending to start over, just 2 people learning how to breathe in the same room again. Sometimes we'd cook together, elbows knocking, arguing over how much garlic goes in the stew. Sometimes we sat in silence on the porch, each with a mug in hand, watching the neighborhood breathe around us. We didn't need to fill every silence. The spaces between our words had learned to hold peace. My father was slower in his warmth, still quiet, still stuck in old routines, but there were cracks in the concrete, little ones, enough for sunlight to break through. He started leaving the light on when he knew I was out late. He poured me coffee before I woke. And once, without warning, he knocked on my door and said, "I found some of your old journals. Figured they should be yours again." He didn't stay to hear my reply. He didn't have to. I visited Mom's grave again. This time, I brought lilies. Not the ones from the grocery store, but wild ones I picked myself near the tree line at Signal Peak. I didn't cry, but I spoke. "I came back, Mom. Not the way I wanted, not as the hero they wrote about in the paper, but I'm here. Lily's grown, she's strong, fierce. You'd love her now more than ever. And Dad, well, he's trying. And me? I think I'm learning how to live in a world that doesn't require me to disappear to matter. I'm staying, for real this time." I turned down the transfer. The envelope Rourke gave me sat untouched on my nightstand for weeks.
Then one morning, after a long walk and a short prayer, I opened it, read the offer, folded it back, and quietly slid it into the trash. Not out of spite, out of peace. Because there was a time when I would have killed to be needed by the machine again. But now, I'm needed here. By people who knew me before I was a rank. By the girl who used to braid my hair and beg me not to leave. By the man who never learned how to say I love you, but showed up every morning to fix a squeaky stair. They asked me to teach, part-time at the base, a course called Tactical Leadership Under Pressure. I almost said no. Almost. But Lily looked at me across the table and said, "You have too much inside you to leave it behind." So I said yes. I walked back into a classroom for the first time in years, faced a room full of wide-eyed cadets who didn't know whether to salute or shake my hand. I told them stories, the real kind, the ones with mud and fear and failure and mercy. Not the stuff they print in the manuals, the kind that teaches you how to come home in one piece and how to help the others who don't. One cadet stayed after class once, said her brother never made it back from his last mission. She asked me how I kept going. I told her the truth. You don't, not always. Sometimes you fall apart, but if you're lucky, someone will help you put the pieces back. And if you're really lucky, you'll help someone else do the same. She nodded and smiled. That was the moment I knew I was exactly where I needed to be. Lily graduated with honors. Dad wore his only suit, I wore my uniform for her. When her name was called, she looked toward the crowd, eyes scanning, searching. And when she found us, she didn't wave. She saluted, right there on the stage. And I stood and saluted back. I could feel the eyes on me again, but this time it wasn't judgment. It was respect. Earned, quiet, real. After the ceremony, she found me outside, in the sunlight. "Remember when you told me I didn't have to forgive you?" "Yeah. Well, I did. I did, a long time ago. I just didn't know how to say it." I hugged her, tight. And for the first time, we didn't feel like a broken story. We felt like a new chapter. There's a photo in our hallway now. Not the old one, a new one. Me in uniform, Lily in hers. Dad between us, eyes squinting like the sun was too proud to hide. No medals, no flags, just us. Alive, together. At dinner one night, Lily asked, "If you could do it all again, would you?" I didn't hesitate. I wouldn't change a thing, except I'd come home sooner. They once called me a ghost, a coward, a deserter. And now they call me teacher, sister, Major General. I was never meant to be a hero. I just didn't want to be forgotten. But now I know. It's not about who remembers you. It's about who you choose to come back for. And I did.